With the Epic Game Store being the massive pile of nuclear sheep shit that it is, Valve has been receiving a lot of good boy points for simply just being, well, Valve, essentially. And behaving themselves reasonably well. I don't like the fact that they're removing review bombs, obviously. I think that is a very short-sighted and stupid thing to do, but by and large Valve has been able to keep itself out of most of the evolving shitstorm these days. In no small part due again to the Epic Game Store constantly trying to shit its pants in new and innovative ways. However, this thing here, Valve talks Steam China curation and exclusivity, an article over on Eurogamer. I will link this in the description below, and I highly suggest you give it a read because it's rather fascinating. I'm just going to go through it real quick and talk about some of the points it makes, because this is very, very interesting stuff. As I've been talking about repeatedly, China is not the most liberal of societies, and it has, as I did in a video a few days ago, been increasing the restrictions on video games yet further. They have all kinds of insane shit, like, for example, facial recognition systems to make sure that minors can only play a few hours a day. They have access to police databases to enforce this. They are making games implement these systems on the developers' end. All kinds of horrible shit. And, you know, stuff like removing blood and corpses in all English words, that sounds positively cute in comparison to the Orwellian level shit of your computer game scanning your face to determine your age and identification number. But there has been a massive loophole in this. They talk about how Steam Global is accessible around China, and since 2015, this absolutely skyrocketed. Now some saying that 30% of Steam's players are Chinese. That is absolutely massive. So they're claiming some 30 million Chinese user accounts. So 30 million user accounts that may purchase 1 or 2 or 3 or God only knows how many games. That is a ludicrous quantity of money that Valve obviously wishes to keep. For obvious reasons. It is also, of course, a absolutely ginormous potential revenue stream. There are a lot of people in China, and there are a lot of gamers in China. China's been in a rather interesting position for the last decade or two because they haven't been allowed to, well, own consoles for absolute ages. That's a relatively new thing in China, and PCs were considered very high-end luxuries. This resulted in a market where mobile games were absolutely ginormous, and since they didn't really have a whole lot of choice in what they wanted to play, it also introduced how do I put this in a gentle fashion? So, you know how over here in the West we occasionally complain about stuff like microtransactions and loot boxes and abusive free-to-play games? Free-to-play games? You know, pay-to-win, shit like this? All of that is positively adorable. Like a tiny, tiny baby kitten taking his first steps compared to what they are exposed to in China. When you don't have an option other than an absolute mountain of extraordinarily abusive and predatory online games, well, the developers can pretty much get away with anything, and they do. They absolutely do. The kind of shit that would be considered outright criminal, probably here in the West. That has pretty much been in the norm for the last couple decades in China. So you can imagine their shock and awe when they discovered Steam and like, holy shit, all of these games for reasonable prices with minimal microtransactions? Good God, is this heaven? Now, there's been kind of a close-guarded secret in the Chinese gaming world, really, because it's also one of those platforms that China has not actually censored. Stuff like Google, Twitter, Facebook, all of that is verboten in China. Although Google is currently cucking and agreeing to censor certain news, for example, and remove news aggregators, etc., and that may allow them access back to the Chinese market. No wonder Google changed their motto from "Don't be evil" to, presumably, "Let's be the biggest shitbags we possibly can," but hey, details. So, Steam is now, however, in the process of launching Steam Official. And by the way, this also gave me a little bit of a roundabout confirmation here that no, Total War 3 Kingdoms probably has not actually been improved in China, but it is still available to Chinese customers via the international version. Basically, whilst you cannot access Google, for example, straight up without the use of a VPN, you can access Steam, because the Great Chinese Firewall has, for some reason or another, decided to not block it. Why? Well, it's anyone's guess, really. Probably because they don't want to piss off 30 million people. It's one of the few escapes from reality that Chinese people have, and any good authoritarian system obviously knows that it needs to keep its people at least somewhat happy. And since Valve decided to entirely on Valve's side, mind you, remove any and all forums and community tabs from the Chinese accessible version. Again, entirely Valve's choice, obviously. I wouldn't be so uncouth as to suggest anybody forced them to do that. It's not dangerous to China whatsoever. Alright, so people get to be happy with their games. Great! Now they're not out protesting against the government's clear abuses of power. Fantastic. But the official Chinese version stands to threaten all of that. Now, they talk a little bit about this. Like, what was the driving force behind Steam China? Will there be some kind of community or forums or discussion area? No, they won't. Absolutely. Like, the Steam guy's like, yeah, I think we would like to do that long term. He's either lying because he knows that will never happen, or he's just being blindly optimistic, one of the two. And on the topic of a curation, so they've said that anything is legal goes, and they move on to basically say, will you consider self-regulating certain things as well? And there's just English arch. There's just policies and laws in place that we have to follow, so yeah, we'll adhere to all of those. In other words, he has basically now tacitly stated that yes, Steam China will abide by all of Steam's regulations. There was another article that also stated that out of the 30,000 odd games currently on Steam, Steam China is currently planned to launch with 40 of them. Those are the 40 that have actually made it through the regulatory needle hole of the Chinese government. 40 out of 30,000. And best of all, the regulatory process can even take up to 6 months if your game even gets accepted in the first place. So that means that hopes to have forums and discussions available on Steam, not going to happen. All of the various regulations, that's going to be forced in. No blood, no gore, no corpses, no English language whatsoever, fully verboten. And of course, they're also going to have to abide by the laws that people can only play a certain amount of hours per day and so on. All of that is going to have to be implemented in Steam. Now, he also talks at the end here that could something external prevent Steam Global from being available in China? Because he's at, so Steam Global will still be available in China, and says nothing will change about Steam Global. Nothing will change about Steam Global. He's also talking about all of those games, because of course those 30 million people that already own titles on Steam, they may have games there, they may have save games there, they may have profiles, etc. What will happen to them? And the Steam representative is saying nothing will happen to Steam Global. And he's probably not lying. Steam Global will remain exactly as it has always been, but the key question, can something external prevent Steam Global from being available in China? And he basically says, yes, yeah, that's entirely possible. Not only is it entirely possible, I can pretty much guarantee you that that is going to happen. Because ask yourself this. If you're the Chinese government, an incredibly authoritarian regime that seems to be doing everything in their power to limit their population's access to information, and to the point of censoring video games and removing cleavage in movies, do you really think that when an official licensed product that is run purely via the approval of and at the license of the Chinese government is available, do you think they will allow the unlicensed versions to remain? Of course not. It's ridiculous to ever believe that they would. Hell, maybe it'll even stay up for a few months. Who knows? But as soon as the government regulations on the approval process of video games is up and running to the point where the Chinese government thinks that this is good enough, This will be able to approve round about the numbers we want. This is good enough to ensure that we're cracking down on anything we don't want. The moment that happens, Steam Global goes dead. I am willing to bet money on that. I am willing to take out a loan to bet money on that. And I'm equally willing to take out a second loan on the fact that Valve is entirely aware of this. They are not so blind as to be like, oh no, they wouldn't do that. Well, they censor Facebook and Twitter and Google and everybody else, but we have a special working relationship with the Chinese government. They wouldn't fuck us. Yeah, I'm sure. And as to whether or not Valve will take a stance for consumer rights, if when the Chinese government moves in and deletes those 30 million accounts on Steam Global, do you think Steam will then be like, no, we will take a principled stance and pull out of China? I'd like to believe they would do that because Google once did that. Google wasn't always evil. They once took a stand against the Chinese government. But I don't think they will. I don't think they will for a second, because at the end of the day, this is even better for them. If Steam has an official Chinese client, which will give the Chinese authorities an even better excuse to simply kill off any outside competitors, wow, suddenly Valve and like one or two other storefronts are the only ones with access to the largest single video game market in the world. Huh. How thoroughly convenient. How fortuitous a coincidence that would be. Indeed. Steam China is going to be a disaster for Chinese gamers, and it will indirectly be a disaster for gaming, I believe, because it's going to remove so many people that might be making video games, that might be making cool shit. Think of all of the people who could be making good games in China, one of the most populous nations on Earth, if they didn't live in an authoritarian hellhole. This is a lose-lose for all of us, but unfortunately not like there's much we can do. With video game companies, like Blizzard, like Google, like everyone basically doing their level best to cuck to the Chinese government because they too want access to this massive market, it is unlikely that anything will really happen. Right now, this article says that there is no firm launch date. I have seen a lot of other articles claiming that Steam China is expected to launch within the year, so I guess we'll have to wait and see, but at that time, I believe that Steam Global is living on very much so borrowed time in China. A few months at most, I'd expect, before that pipeline is cut off forever, and the various companies will have to cuck to Chinese authorities. That'll be a very interesting time. We'll have to see. Will Creative Assembly enforce Chinese rules, or will they take a stand? Will EA enforce rules? Will Ubisoft? Will Blizzard? I think I already know the answer, but it'll be interesting to see nevertheless. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider sharing it around, because it is very helpful to my channel and any future content I may make. Until then, have a good day.